Well, thanks all for joining us. This panel is about building the natural gas infrastructure of tomorrow. And so we're really excited to have our panelist, Richard Meyer, who is the Vice President of Energy Analysis and Standards at the American Gas Association, and Liz Bowman, who's the Vice President of Government Affairs at Williams. So how about we start off with you two telling us a little bit about yourself and your organization and company.
Sure. So I'm Vice President at Williams. We are an interstate and interstate natural gas pipeline company. We move about a third of the natural gas that's used every day in the United States, and we have everything from upstream through gathering and processing, which Richard represents, to the large intrastate transmission lines, as well as we support LNG exports, and we have a whole marketing arm at Williams. Additionally, I'm here representing PAGE, the partnership to address global emissions, and PAGE is an organization that really promotes LNG exports and to make sure that we are using those exports to strategically represent America's interests worldwide.
Richard Meyer, American Gas Association. As Bree said, I'm responsible for our energy markets analysis and standards, but what AGA, who we are, we represent the investor-owned natural gas utilities that serve natural gas to homes and businesses in all 50 states. So the gas that passes through our members' pipelines gets served to 189 million Americans. That's more than voted in the last election. So this is a pretty big constituency within the energy world. We're very much focused on affordable, reliable, safe access to natural gas, and we can talk a little bit about the innovation going on to reduce the emissions footprint associated with the energy delivered by our members.
Thanks, Richard. And between the two of you, you have about 35 plus years in the natural gas industry.
That happens to be my age as well.
Can you just talk a little bit about what you've seen happen in the industry over the last just handful of years, and also what you see happening in the future?
Sure. So at Williams, I think we've always been focused on building infrastructure. We have built these large pipeline networks across the country, but just in the last couple of years, we've really seen an emergence of growth on the natural gas side in two areas. One, specific to LNG exports, and then two, now with this new emergence of electrification, onshoring, and then demand from data centers. So I think over just the past couple of years, we've seen this huge shift from the traditional production of oil and natural gas and moving it from where the wellhead to the customer to this whole new area of the globalization of LNG exports, but additionally domestically on how we can win the race for AI and use our strategic resources to make sure that we're powering those data centers. So it's been just a huge shift in the past couple of years.
It's hard to overstate how important natural gas is in this country in terms of creating a strategic advantage for us. If you rewind the clock back just 20 years, we've seen domestic natural gas production double. We've seen the amount of natural gas we use in the electric power sector double. This year, we are at record levels of industrial demand, and that's not just because of weather. That's the structural growth, as Liz said, from onshoring, from reshoring, from these new large loads and manufacturers. For residential commercial use, we continue to see growth there, less volumetrically, but more in terms of customer hookups. One new natural gas customer connects to the natural gas system every minute of every day. So this is a growing industry. It has powered our economic growth. It's helped reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and the use of natural gas in the power sector is the number one reason we've reduced emissions as much as we have since 2005. So this is about economic growth, and we've seen tremendous progress there. This is about enabling resources that are now commercially possible in terms of shale, and it's about powering the economy of the future.
So you're seeing an increased use of natural gas or more natural gas demand. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about what the future looks like and building out the infrastructure. So talk a little bit about the infrastructure, how fast you're building out, where you're building out, and also talk a little bit about the challenges that you're seeing in that area.
Sure. So first, when you talk about demand, I want to put it in perspective a little bit. So Williams operates Transco, which is the largest pipeline by volume in the United States. The next pipeline is 40% lower in terms of volume. That system in particular, over the last winter, we saw 17 of our 20 top peak days were all in last winter, and that was a pretty mild winter. Additionally, this summer, we saw 15 of our 20 all-time peak days were just in the past summer, meaning that natural gas demand is continuing to increase and is increasing consistently at high levels. So with that said, I think the challenge to that is really making sure that we have the infrastructure to build that out. So in terms of building it, where we're building is everywhere. I mean, when you look at the East Coast, in particular, the Atlantic up to the East Coast, Williams is representing 47% of all interstate growth just in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. And then when you look at the Pacific, we, I think, we have 77% of all planned projects are Williams projects. So we have a pretty large footprint across this country. The biggest challenge we have across that is permitting, but in particular, it's not just permitting projects, it's dealing with this ridiculous permitting process that's put in place by states that do not want natural gas infrastructure. And so that, I think, really is the biggest challenge. And so where we want to build and where people want us to build do not necessarily go, I think, hand in hand. And so that's something we're trying to address and figure out the best way forward. Now, the flip side of that is that the irony is that places where we're trying to build, we're doing that because the cost of natural gas is so astronomically high in those areas. And it also has the highest emissions because the demand there is being filled by fuel oil and LNG exports and other things that do not necessarily have the same environment and safety profile as natural gas.
Yeah, I want to pull on that demand thread and then talk about the infrastructure constraints. So in 2024, we set an annual record for natural gas demand and 9 monthly records. We also set a daily record for natural gas demand, which was then surpassed on January 21st of this year. So we're continuing to see that growth both in the average demand as well as peaks on a daily and monthly basis. In 2024, amid record demand, we also saw the lowest natural gas prices in reported history once you adjust for inflation. So it was, and that was from, according to the Energy Information Administration. So this idea that demand's going to raise prices is not necessarily true. Where we see higher prices and consistently higher prices are in those areas that are pipeline constrained. Actually, in some areas, we see very low prices because there's too much supply and it can't get out. But when it comes to consumers, particularly in the Northeast and some other places, it's those areas where we don't have enough pipeline and, in some cases, storage infrastructure to serve that demand. And people, again, want natural gas. They're hooking up every minute of every day. It's because it's affordable, it's reliable, in your home it's familiar, builders like to build with it, and it's a low-cost resource, whether you're looking to reshore or onshore your manufacturing plant. You know, they're coming here because we have the reliable and cheap energy. And that makes us competitive with China. That makes us very competitive with Europe, which is in a totally different world when it comes to its natural gas resources and pricing. So that's our strategic advantage here. But we're going to get in our own way, and we are already in some cases in our own way because of our inability to build the infrastructure to serve that demand. And one last thing I'll say, that's not just a natural gas pipeline and storage issue. It's across the energy industry. And the same issues that can be used to thwart, say, a new interstate natural gas pipeline can also be used to thwart other types of energy projects as well. And that really speaks to the need for permitting reform and just creating a situation where we can build the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure that we need.
When you look at the pricing in particular in infrastructure, if you compare Pennsylvania and New York, for the past 5 winters, the price of people's electricity bills in Pennsylvania is 26% lower every single year on average compared to New York, right next door, mainly because of the lack of pipeline infrastructure. And so that's just an important case study. And then as Richard mentioned, the demand and the infrastructure are just not keeping pace. So demand for natural gas over the past 10 years has increased 47%. The infrastructure to carry that has only increased 26%, and the storage in particular has only increased 2%. So storage is also a really important piece of that puzzle that I think we don't talk about enough.
Yeah. And can we talk a little bit more about that? So there's this need for natural gas. You have industries that want more of it. What's happening when you can't serve them because you cannot build these projects fast enough? What does that mean for America and our industries?
It means really, really high prices. or it means imported LNG from other countries, or it means fuel oil that is being used to fill that demand, which is 50% higher emissions, and it costs 50% more. So that's what's being done. That's what's being done in the Northeast, and that's what is going to continue to happen in other areas, and it's only going to get worse if we don't build more pipelines.
I mean, there are communities that want gas, and it's just sometimes hard to get that pipeline built out to that community for that new housing development, for that hospital, right? And so something we've been focused on at AGA has been the proliferation of state policies that are, and there's a whole host of those, from legislative all the way down to technical building codes. And they're designed, in some cases, to limit or prohibit the access to natural gas. And you asked about the consequences. Well, the consequence is that generally you're going to pay higher, you're going to have higher utility bills. Electricity on a energy equivalent basis is on average 3 times higher than natural gas across the U.S. In the Northeast, it's somewhere between 4 and 6 times higher. So, you can switch to electric, but unless you're 6 times more efficient, which you can't be because of the technology, you're paying more for your energy. So I think it affects consumers' pocketbooks. And we've been talking about this for a long time, but I think we're starting to see a lot of local policymakers and regulators understand, well, this is really an issue because bills are going up here. And so they're looking for ways to minimize consumer impact. And, again, one of the best ways to do that is use the energy you have more efficiently and give them access to the types of energy that you need and that's going to fit their requirements.
We've this whole conference, we've talked about permitting reform, and this panel will be no different. So let's talk a little bit about specifics around what permitting reform that your members need, Richard, and that Williams needs. So Liz, maybe we start off with you.
Sure. We need to reform the Clean Water Act 401 process. I'm laughing because that's all we talk about, but the reason we talk about it all the time is because it is that important to fix this issue. The Clean Water Act 401 process, so anytime that you're building an intrastate natural gas pipeline, you have to get a water quality certificate through the 401 of the Clean Water Act from every state that you are going to be traversing. If you pass a WOTUS, which everything is a WOTUS. So therefore you need this water quality certificate. Nowadays, states that do not want energy infrastructure or want to stop natural gas pipelines will either refuse to issue their water quality certificate. They will drag it out for years and years to the point that the project becomes economical and you decide not to build it, or they will lade in these pipeline water quality certificates with unworkable conditions, essentially things that cost tens of millions of dollars that delay the project and make it basically unworkable. And then in addition to that, you're getting sued by all these activist environmentalists because they're trying to stop the pipeline, so they sue on the water quality certification. So until we address the frivolous litigation, the need to issue permits in a timely manner, actually when they are submitted within the 1-year timeline, and then additionally reducing the scope of those water quality certificates just to direct discharges into navigable waters, we are not going to be able to fix that issue. Additionally, just overarching, one state should not be able to weaponize this environmental statute to block an interstate pipeline from an entire region getting affordable, clean, and reliable natural gas. So that is the main issue for us, and that's the thing that we talk the most about, and that is the most important.
Can you talk a little bit more about how right now, a state can stop a process?
Oh, I'd love to talk about New York. So we have Transco, our pipeline goes up and down the East Coast, all the way from the Gulf of America, basically up to New York City. And then it kind of stops because the state of New York has not allowed us to build into the state or through the state to provide gas into the Northeast. They have used anything and everything to use the water quality 401 process to block that project. And so that is one of the issues that we're facing, is that they use this environmental statute, they weaponize it against us, and they create all of these conditions that make it nearly impossible to build a permit. So as many of you know, President Trump issued an executive order on the energy emergency and the need to build energy infrastructure, particularly in the Northeast. So Williams is being responsive to that executive order, and we are trying to build 2 pipelines in the Northeast, the Nessie pipeline, which would provide natural gas into the New York City area, and the Constitution pipeline, which provides gas directly from Pennsylvania producers through New York and into the northeastern states to alleviate some of their high energy prices and lower their emissions. So that is what we're trying to do, and we are cautiously optimistic that the state of New York recognizes that the entire region needs that natural gas, and it's important for their citizens, and it's important for our energy security. And also, we hope that they recognize that the natural gas in New York and around New York is an economic boost for the entire region. So that is what we're hoping to do, and we're hoping that they recognize that and work with us.
It's really important, too, that this delays, these litigation tactics, it's not just thwarting a natural gas company from building a pipeline, right? Litigation adds 4 years to complete a project already on top of everything that you got to do to site, permit, and construct a pipeline or any other type of clean energy project. That has real impacts on the economy, as Liz just said. It has impacts on consumers, that raises prices. There was an S&P Global analysis recently that said building out more pipeline capacity in the Northeast, so that's kind of New York all the way up into New England, would lower prices 30%. And that was just based on a little bit of capacity, right? So there's some real economic and consumer benefits here, and there's also emissions benefits, right? Remember that natural gas is the number one reason why we're reducing emissions as it displaces other types of fuels, and there's still a lot of fuel to displace, including up in New England, that's higher carbon. And this infrastructure can also be used to deliver the next generation of fuels, whether you're talking renewable natural gas and hydrogen as well. This is an investment in a platform that's not only going to springboard our energy economy into the future, but also continue to help us make environmental progress with regard to the energy that we deliver and consume.
And so, Richard, Liz talked a lot about what, Williams needs when it comes to permitting reform. What about your members? What do the member natural gas utilities need? Yeah,
it's a great question. So on permitting reform itself, Section 401, definitely a priority. Add a couple more numbers and you're at Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. This is really due to similar kind of discharge issues into what's called waters of the United States. There's a nationwide permitting process that basically says if you follow the checklist, you can get a permit and go forth and build that project. One of our priorities is to keep that process working, and the Army Corps of Engineers is responsible for that nationwide permit 12, and we're encouraging them to re-up that and get that into place so that these projects can continue. But really a lot of the same priorities as we have with what Liz said. NEPA reform, we could talk through that, and there's probably differences in opinion on some of the details there. We're fully engaged in all the conversations. We really want a pragmatic path forward, but limiting the timelines, but not just that, but having some sort of presumption that if you don't give a decision, the project's going to move ahead here. I mean, so there's concepts here that can help address these bottlenecks and effectively disallow, we'll say, actors that are using statutes that were never meant to be used in this way to be used against any type of energy project, including natural gas pipelines. We also, there's some things that we could talk about at FERC and some of the permitting processes there. There was actually a statement out of FERC last week, and they're not going to be changing their certification process, which is a good thing. And we could keep going down the list. It gets very technical very quickly, but let me just say, I think that this is a big tent, and just the issues that we've been facing for the last 10, 15 years, we're now starting to see this applied more broadly, and so there really is a need for, if we want to build out energy infrastructure, permitting reform is going to benefit not just the natural gas industry, but our ability to collectively build the energy infrastructure we need, whether that's electric, gas, and so forth.
And, I think the theme of this conference has been it's really hard to build things, and we need to be able to build things in order to have a cleaner, more robust economy. Some of the things that I've heard today that I just want to, flag and maybe see if you have any reactions is, yes, fixing federal permitting is going to be key to getting these projects to move faster, but you also noted some issues at the state level as well. Can you talk a little bit more about how, how federal versus state permitting really influences, projects not moving forward?
Yeah, states are a very important stakeholder. I hate that word, but they're a very important stakeholder when it comes to building infrastructure in their jurisdiction. So they have every right to respect the water quality and the air quality where projects are being built and to make sure that they're looking out for their citizens. What they should not have the ability to do is weaponize those environmental statutes to block the build out of that infrastructure to benefit an entire region or country. And I think that's the difference there. But there's all sorts of permitting issues that happen at the federal, state, and local level. We don't just need one permit from the federal government. We should just need one permit. But we need state permits and local permits, and that's air permits and water permits. And the permitting process is just, it's red tape upon red tape. And I also, at the end of the day, all it really is just a permission slip. Okay, now you can go build. So you have to go through all this process just to get multiple permission slips. But at the end of the day, you still have to be compliant with all the other rules and regulations. So the Natural Gas Act in particular, we must follow all the rules of the Natural Gas Act no matter where we build. And that is after we get our permits. So the permit, all it really is a permission slip. It doesn't actually ensure that people are in compliance. And so it really just bogs down the process, delays things, and creates additional opportunities for frivolous lawsuits.
Maybe I'll just add that at the state level, we've seen some states that are passing laws, building codes that would limit or prohibit gas. We've also seen 28 states that have passed bipartisan legislation to ensure energy choice. This is access to all types of energy. So, is there an opportunity to look at that more broadly and ensure that consumers have access to any type of energy, the types of energy they need that fit their circumstance and meet their needs?
We are out of time, so thank you both for joining us. If we can get a round of applause for
Thank you.
Richard and Liz. Thank you.